Let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Ashok Sachdeva, Professor of English in a government college affiliated to Devi Ahilya University, Indore. This is a lecture on John Milton. John Milton, the period is almost 9 December 1608 to 8 November 1674, roughly a period of 65 years. And the famous quotation of John Milton is famous for his wonderful quotations and inspiring quotes. His quotation, "The mind is its own place and in itself can make heaven of hell or a hell of heaven," has become very famous. John Milton was born on 9 December 1608 in Brady Street, Cheapside, London, England. He was a poet, prose polemicist and civil servant. John Milton is best known for his epic poem Paradise Lost, published in 1667, written in blank verse and widely considered one of the greatest works of literature ever written. So, this was an idea about birth and early life. Let me continue with this, that William Halley's 1796 biography called him the greatest English author and regarded as one of the prominent writers in the English language. He was the son of composer John Milton and his wife Sarah Jeffrey. He married Mary Powell, whom he married 1642 and who died in 1652, Catherine Woodcock, then he married 1656, who died in 1658, then Elizabeth Mansell, whom he married 1663. Milton actually died of consumption on 8th November 1674 and was buried in the church of St. Giles without Cripplegate, Forest Street, London. Now, let us discuss about the works, the varied kinds of works that he has produced. Milton is only second to Shakespeare, and he has written poetry, drama and number of such literary outputs. As far as poetry and drama is concerned, he has written On the Morning of Christ's Nativity, published in 1629. Then he wrote on Shakespeare, on arriving at the age of 23, which is a famous sonnet. Milton is known for writing sonnets. He is a writer, he is a sonneteer. Sonnet is a poem of 14 lines and Milton's sonnets have a different pattern, and Milton sonnets, Shakespeare's sonnets and Spenser's sonnets, and they have Miltonic sonnets have their own pattern, which we will discuss later on. And another important works are El Allegro, published in 1632, Il Penseroso, Lycidas, which is a pastoral elegy, published in 1637, Paradise Lost 1667, and after writing Paradise Lost he wrote Paradise Regained, and finally Samson Agonistes. So, the list of works is very long, and he was also a writer of prose, of Reformation and Areopagitica in 1644 are some of his famous works, and Iconoclasts and several others. Let us discuss about the important aspect of Milton. In April 1652, Milton at the age of 43 became totally blind. In May, his wife died 3 days after giving birth to the fourth child, and 6 weeks later his third child and only son John also died. So, he underwent number of such tragedies, and we do not know the cause of his blindness, but perhaps the cause of his blindness was bilateral retinal detachment or glaucoma, as the case may be. The poet lost his eyesight in his 50s. The poet felt he could have better used his eyesight in writing something to praise God. Another message which he has conveyed into his writing, there is the value of perseverance or the patience, and that we can see about his study, about his poetry and about his travel. Milton is regarded among the most learned of all English poets. As I told you, he is second only to Shakespeare. Milton read both ancient and modern works of theology, philosophy, history, politics, literature, science to pursue a prospective poetical career. In May 1638, Milton embarked upon a tour of France and Italy till August 1639. His travels supplemented his study with new and direct experience of artistic and religious traditions, especially Roman Catholicism. Milton collected his work in 1645 poems in the midst of excitement attending the possibility of establishing a new English government. Milton, as you know, is best known for Paradise Lost, and Paradise Lost is written in as many as 12 books, and Paradise Lost book 1 and book 2, we can see that is prescribed in our course. Paradise Lost, the epic poem in blank verse, one of the late works by John Milton, originally issued in 10 books in 1667, and with books 7 and 10 each split into 2 parts, published in 12 books in the second edition of 1674. Milton's poetry was slow to see the light of the day. His first published poem was on Shakespeare, published in 1630, anonymously included in the second folio edition of William Shakespeare's plays in 1632. Political thought as it stands, Milton was a passionately individual Christian humanist poet. He appears in 17th century English Puritanism, an age characterized as the world turned upside down. He is a Puritan, unwilling to surrender his conscience to party positions on public policy. Milton's political thought, driven by competing convictions, a reformed faith and a humanistic spirit, led to very complicated outcomes. As far as political thought is concerned, we have the heretical portrayal of biblical figures. Paradise Lost incorporates both republican concepts as established in his political tracts, such as the tenure of kings and magistrates, and heretical Arian theology as set out in his De Doctrina Christiana. The Paradise Lost was a source of inspiration and fascination for even romantic poets such as William Blake and P.B. Shelley. The romantic interpretation of Satan as the hero of Paradise Lost stems from Blake's statements that Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it. This quotation became very famous. Let me tell you something about the work that is prescribed in our course, Paradise Lost book 1. As you know, Milton is best known for this work and is regarded as the greatest epic poem in English. It's written in blank verse by the 17th century English poet, as you know, John Milton. The first 2 sentences of 26 lines of Paradise Lost are extremely compressed, containing a great deal of information about Milton's reasons for writing his epic, his subject matter and his attitude towards his subject. The first version consists of 10 books with over 10,000 lines of verse. Together with Paradise Regained and Samson Agonistes, it confirms Milton's reputation as one of the greatest English poets, and that is why even in the master degree in almost all the universities of across Madhya Pradesh and India, we have Milton as a special author, where all his works are most of his works are prescribed. Now, let me tell you about Paradise Lost book 1 and the major characters as they appear in Paradise Lost book 1. Major character is Satan. Satan was he was formerly Lucifer before his rebellion. Earlier he was with God in heaven, and he was called as Lucifer. He was known as Lucifer, and he was second only to God. He was second in the position, and he is the first major character introduced in the poem. He was once the most beautiful of all angels. Satan, then later on Lucifer, became Satan, and he is a tragic hero who famously declares, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. This quotation has also become very famous in literature. Means नरक में बादशाहत करना बेहतर है बजाय स्वर्ग की गुलामी करने से. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. And following his failed rebellion against God, he is cast out from heaven and condemned to hell because he rebelled against God, Satan. So, Paradise Lost book 1 and book 2, you can see Satan as the leading character. He is the protagonist and he is the antagonist, but he is the protagonist. He has been described as a hero, and he has to his credit the wonderful inspiring speeches that he gives to his own fallen angels. Major characters in Milton's Paradise Lost, the other one is Beelzebub, who is a separate angel. He is second to Satan, serves as a second in command and advisor, one next himself in power and next in crime, long after known in Palestine. Another you might have heard about, Adam and Eve. Adam is the first human created by God from the dust of the earth. And then we have Eve, Adam and Eve. Eve is the first woman created by God from Adam's rib as a companion for him. And then there is a Belial. Belial is a synonym for the devil or an adjective meaning wickedness or destruction. Then we have Mammon. In Bible, Mammon presented as a king or a demon. Is a personification of wealth. So, each character is represented as a symbol, is a symbolical representation of a trait or a character that imbibes that character or portrayal. Ereto in Greek religion is one of the 9 muses, the patron of lyric and erotic poetry or hymns. She is often depicted playing a lyre. Muse, one of the 9 sisters goddess in Greek mythology, presiding over song and poetry and the arts and sciences, is the Greek music. Let us also come to know about Jesus Christ. As you know, Lord Jesus Christ. He is the Jesus of Galilee or Jesus of Nazareth, born 6 to 4 BC, Bethlehem, and he died 30 AD in Jerusalem. He is a religious leader, revered in Christianity. One of the world's major religions is Christianity. He is regarded by most Christians as the incarnation of God. The alleged marriage of Jesus and Mary Magdalene to be viewed as a holy wedding, and the Jesus, Mary Magdalene and their alleged daughter Sarah to be viewed as a holy family in order to question traditional gender roles and family values. So, we can see that the god of creation, goddess of creation, and the Uriel, who is the younger brother deceased, Azrael, younger sister, Remiel, Michael Demirgos, who is a twin brother, Gabriel, younger brother, they all constitute the family. These are some of the names, because Milton's Paradise Lost is full of biblical imagery, because Paradise Lost is written in a grand style, because it dwells upon the big themes and the grand themes. So, there are big thoughts uttered in a big way. There is a grand thoughts expressed in grand style, lofty thoughts uttered in a lofty way. So, the themes are very bigger, is God and angels and devils. So, theme is bigger. So, it is a religious epic, you can say, a literary epic. And then we have another character coming in, Lilith. Lilith appears in Has-Been's Hotel. She is the wife of Lucifer, the queen of hell, and Charlie's mother. Then we have a few more characters. We have Moloch, who is a Canaanite deity associated in biblical sources with the practice of child sacrifice, associated with the child sacrifice. And the owl is similar to the owl, a satanic entity that demands child sacrifice. Then Metatron is considered one of the highest of the angels, and they represent mysticism. And the archangels have been known as strong guardians. They protect us, direct us, and defend us. And then we have Archangel Uriel. The sword is also otherwise associated with many angels, which is usually associated with the Uriel. Now, the themes of Paradise Lost book 1. What is the theme ultimately? The justification of ways of God to man and the importance of obedience to God. The opening words of Paradise Lost indicate the theme of man's first disobedience, because Adam and Eve, they first disobeyed and they tasted the forbidden fruit, and they brought all the woe and misery in the world, and that we are in the cycle of birth and death, is a cycle and recycling of birth and death, that we are in a sort of a run of the mill situations. And the Milton narrates this story of Adam and Eve's disobedience, explains how and why it happens, and places the story within the larger context of Satan's rebellion and Jesus' resurrection. Another theme is the hierarchical nature of the universe. Paradise Lost is about hierarchy and obedience. The layout of the universe, the heaven above, full picture of the cosmos has been drawn, and the map of this ethereal world has been drawn. Hell is below, the heaven is above, the earth somewhere in the middle. They present the universe as such. And this fall is partly fortunate. After he sees the visions of Christ, the redemption of humankind, in book 12, Adam refers to his own sin as felix culpa, means happy fault, suggesting the fall of humankind, while originally seeming an unmitigated catastrophe, does in fact bring good with it. Actually, it was only the God's design. It is all the scheme of God. It is all God's will in everything that we see or perceive, or everything that happens. Now, actually, what are the main textual points in this Paradise Lost book 1? Milton is dealing with the issues of heaven and hell, God and Satan, and the fall of man. So, you can connect all these threads together. He also draws a distinct parallel between Satan's rebellion against God and man's disobedience to God, and how things are connected. Milton portrays Satan as a military leader who assembles and commands his troop of fallen angels, similar to the ancient Greek epics that glorified war heroes, and serves to paint Satan as a kind of idealized protagonist. Solomon could read them, the entry of Adam into the garden only 40 days after his creation. So, there was a disobedience which has been connected with the theme, and then he was asked, they were asked by God not to eat the fruit of the tree. This caused disorder in the creation, and the humanity inherited sin and guilt from Adam and Eve. So, the first sin was committed by Adam and Eve. In Western Christian art, the fruit of the tree is commonly depicted as the apple, which originated in Central Asia. Now, the few important textual themes that keep connecting with each other is Adam and Eve's disobedience allows God to show his mercy and temperance in their punishments, and his eternal providence towards humankind. So, this first disobedience comes about when the devil, in the form of a servant, tempts Eve to take and eat some fruit from the tree of knowledge. Eve then tells Adam what she has done, and he too tests the forbidden fruit, and that is how the whole tragedy is brought about. Pandemonium is another important word here, which is the capital of the hell which Satan has built after his downfall from heaven to the hell. John Milton also invented the name for the capital of hell, the high capital of Satan and his peer, built by the fallen angels at the suggestion of Mammon at the end of the book. Milton actually invokes classical muse in the beginning. In the opening lines of the text is a classical muse, Urania, as the heavenly muse, is an invocation, and that is also the muse of astronomy. The poem deals with man's disobedience, as you know, and the results thereof, and justify the gods of ways to man, and the story of Adam and Eve and their fall. So, he has introduced this character Satan, who is a former beautiful angel, great angel in heaven as Lucifer, and then he tries to overthrow God because he becomes ambitious. He wanted to become God himself, and therefore, he wants to overthrow God's rule and banded together with the other rebel angels to begin a civil war. They were defeated by God and cast out of heaven and into the hell. So, there is more of a focus on Satan in Paradise Lost book 1, and he is the protagonist and he is the hero, and therefore, he is presented as a protagonist rather than as an antagonist. Satan, you can see, and his all the counterparts and his all companion warred against God, and they were defeated and cast from heaven, as you know. So, he is described as lying in the lake. Satan is huge, gigantic, he is so vast, he is compared to a Titan or the Leviathan, and next to Satan lies his associate Beelzebub, who is only second in command. Satan realizes, of course, that he has been defeated in his battle against God. His sense of pride stops him to ask God for forgiveness and repentance. Milton here hints at the idea that even though Satan thinks he has control of his own life and decisions, God is always one step ahead of creations. And to understand the complete power, God had overtaken Satan, and that his battle was doomed to be futile is proved. Modern readers see Satan as the sympathetic underdog of the story, and to see God as rigid and unfeeling character. So, Satan has been glorified in part 1. The story, as you know, that begins with the Satan and the other rebel angels waking up to find themselves floating on a lake of fire in hell, transformed into devils. Upset, Satan is very upset. He gathers the fallen angels together. They work to build a capital in hell for themselves, pandemonium, and they form a council of ministers to debate waging more warfare against God. Satan and the angels do not recognize that it is only through God's permission that they were able to loosen the chains that bound them upon their arrival in hell. God allowed because He is all knowing and all seeing, and intends to change their evil intentions into goodness. So, it is all God's design. Satan tried to overthrow God's rule and band it together, therefore. So, the setting here is, you can see that the first 2 books are set in hell. Milton spends a good amount of time describing hell's surroundings, even adding the little detail that hell becomes a frozen archaic once where one travels some distance from where the fallen angels initially congregate or gather. The story of the Garden of Eden is theological. Use of mythological themes to explain human progression from a state of innocence and bliss to the present human condition of sin. So, there is a larger context, as you can see, and that is the human condition of knowledge, sin, misery and death. And you can see the garden in Eden, heaven on earth, was destroyed by the flood is a significant consideration. It is an ominous illustration of the consequences of sin. It destroys much of God's witness on earth, particularly His communion with men. In Exodus, the nation of Israel is called God's firstborn son. In Psalms, David is called son of God. I think David is supposed to be the son of God, and who proclaims that he is God's begotten son on the day he was made king. Solomon is also called the son of God. Angels, just and pious men, and the kings of Israel are also called sons of God. Now, a few more points. The intention of Satan is to continue the struggle against God. He has a strong willpower, indefatigable willpower, and he says, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Is better to be own king, one's master of one's own life, than serve some other master. Satan is able to free himself from his chains and rise from the fire. Other fallen angels also join him, including Beelzebub, Moloch, Chemos, Balaam, Astaroth, Astarte, and then Dagon, Rimmon, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Mammon and Belial. These are some of the fallen angels who have joined hands with Satan. And they immediately, as soon as they are cast from heaven to hell, they start working on a capital city and for their hellish empire. And their architect, their engineer is Mulciber, who begins to construct a great tower that comes to symbolize the capital of hell, Pandemonium. So, you can see the very first line that begin of man's first disobedience and the fruit of the forbidden tree, whose mortal test brought death into the world and all our woe, with loss of Eden. So, these 4 lines clearly open the theme of the Paradise Lost, book 1. And you can see Satan Saturn says, what though the field be lost, all is not lost. The unconquerable will and the study of revenge and the immortal hate they possess towards the God will survive. So, these are the some of the speeches, some of the quotations, Saturn's inspiring speeches, and then he says, die he or justice must, unless for him some other rebel as willing pay the rigid satisfaction, death or. And the next one is the gender, my author and disposer what thou biddest unargued I obey, so God ordains, God is thy law. These are some of the textual lines in the beginning. I am discussing the first 200 lines of the text in this lecture itself for you. So, there is a disobedience, and now let us see the purpose, Milton's purpose of Paradise Lost. Milton's stated purpose for the poem is to justify the ways of God to men. As he portrays, God is often conversing about his plans and his motives for his actions with the Son of God. And Milton's beliefs are also, on the one side we have the ideology of Saturn and we have the ideology of Milton going cheek by jowl together. So, I think Saturn becomes the spokesman of Milton, and sometimes an important question in the examination is also asked, autobiographical element in Milton's Paradise Lost book, or Milton as Saturn himself, or Saturn is Milton himself, or whatever. So, such questions are interchangeable, where we can see, because here the comparison is with the Protestant Christianity, and also in the late 1650s Milton may have at least toyed with these idea of monism. So, we can say the Saturn, but as I said, the lofty thoughts are uttered in lofty way, big thoughts uttered in a big way. So, here the quality of Paradise Lost book or even of Milton throughout his is a classical poet, and the biggest quality of Milton is that it is sublimity. Sublimity means sublime language, it is the sublime language that contributes to the. So, he has written Paradise Lost book 1 in the grand style. The poetic style of John Milton is Miltonic verse, Miltonic epic or Miltonic blank verse was highly influential poetic structure which was popularized by Milton. The grand style is a style of rhetoric notable for its use of figurative language and for its ability to evoke emotions. The term was coined by Matthew Arnold. This term of grand style was given by a famous critic in the famous English poet Matthew Arnold, who says the style is highly ornamented with the stylistic devices such as metaphors and similes as well as the use of personification. So, use of personifications, use of epic similes, grand style, sublimity of language, sublime language which is highly inspiring language. Even the Saturn's speech is highly inspiring. It infuses life into us when we read the lines or the speeches of Saturn. Milton's choice to write his epic in blank verse, actually blank verse is unrhymed iambic pentameter. Unrhymed iambic pentameter means his total disregard for the rhyming patterns. So, he writes in blank verse. So, here he draws upon two traditions, the classical epic exemplified by Homer and Virgil and the Christian tradition embodied in the Bible as well as Dante's Divine Comedy and Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen. So, you can see all these influences. So, you can see that Milton's Paradise Lost book 1 and throughout all the volumes and even in other Paradise Regained or Samson Agonistes, Areopagitica, you will see here in Paradise Lost book 1 epic similes, grand style, sublimity, lofty thoughts uttered in a lofty way, grand thoughts, these become the hallmark of his poetry. Now, I gave you the first opening lines of the text, and there is an invocation of the goddess Muse. He says, what in me is dark illumine, what is low raise and support, that to the height of this great argument I may assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to man. So, these are the opening lines, and here he itself clarifies his motive and purpose of writing this Paradise Lost Book 1. With this, I stop my lecture. My profound thanks go to Electronic Media Resource Center EMRC, Dr. Akhilesh Singh, Dr. Chandan Gupta and all his team, and for all his technical support for helping me prepare this lecture and to record this lecture. And with this, I stop here. I will continue reading the text in my second lecture. Thank you so much.